The October developer update for New World is here, and well, 1, it's early, and 2, it's in a different format, and 3, there's no actual roadmap. That sounds like it's coming next month or even in December. But there's some very interesting things in it. So it's actually hosted by Twitch streamers and the people who run New World Fans, BDLG and Redbird. In a way, it's sort of like them interviewing the developers. But let's talk about what's inside. Before we do, big shout out to my YouTube members. If you want to support the channel, that's the best way to do so. So as I said, the first thing is we didn't actually have a roadmap. Even though that was sort of said at the end of the last one that the roadmap would be coming in October, here they're sort of talking about what might be in that roadmap rather than the roadmap itself. One of the things that they spoke about, which I'm a bit confused about, it sounds like they're going to have this sort of like hybrid dungeon, which is effectively going to be a mix between, I think, Starstone and Amrine. I'm not sure what the hell that is. Let's just wait and see what that's going to look like. They said they're going to take the best parts out of both. Maybe it's because they don't want those expeditions to be pure mutated on their own. Who knows? Along with that though, there is going to be a new level of mutation. They also were hinting quite heavily throughout this about raids. Now the first raid is probably going to be the sandworm, basically the desert worm. So in my eyes, that looks like it's going to be like a one boss raid, a little bit like a trial, or I think in Final Fantasy they have the same kind of thing. Hopefully at some point we'll get like proper dungeon diving raids, but for now that sounds like it's coming. It'll be on the roadmap, I think, and probably will release sometime next year. It'll be like in the year. It won't be in the expansion, if there is an expansion. That's sort of just my own personal theory. But yeah, that sort of sounds like it's being worked on and is coming. They didn't say how many players, just more than 5. There were a couple of like things where they spoke quite vaguely. For example, territory control systems, they say we're getting changed, and I don't think they just mean like the war cooldowns. It sounded like they have some bigger plans for that, but obviously they didn't actually elaborate on what that was. They did say though that it would probably come before March, but alas, I don't know if they're referring to like some sort of completely change to territory control, or if they're talking about the changes to the PvP influence. It's hard to say. But for the PvP influence, we did get an insight to what they're planning there. So we know that they took out 2 of the PvP missions, and we sort of now know what they're planning to replace it with. They want to have a system where some zones are actually sort of like hotspots at specific times. Along with that, it sounds like instead of just having 1 fort per region, there's actually going to be multiple. Whether or not they're forts or just sort of little camps that you can control, basically they just call them control points. We don't know, obviously, but that sounds really interesting. They just said multiple, they didn't say how many. And the idea is the more you have of them, the quicker you will gain influence in that zone. So if you have all of the faction control points, then you'll be able to hand in quests and like get it very quickly. That sounds really good, and I do really like that idea. Another thing that was mentioned, but again, no real details, in spring there will be a new event that will be called Springtime Bloom. Something that they did spend a bit of time talking about is Cross Realm. Now, I got excited because I was like, oh, we're having Cross Realm for everything. No, we're actually just going to start with Cross Realm for Outpost Rush, and then they're going to expand that system. No ETA was given on that one. Again, I think this is actually going to be like when they just have that technology ready. Gear sets were once again confirmed. They were talking about how they really want to get it right. One of the hosts, I'm not sure which one, asked about being able to move gear in your inventory, and they were like, no, we've never thought about that. And I was like, what? It's crazy to me that in the UI, it's just so hard to actually manage what you have beyond just saying like, oh, I want to save this gear set. I want to be able to store items in places that I want to, in the order that I want to, and you literally can't do that in New World. Again, transmog was confirmed. I had seen this in sort of like little forum posts and stuff like that, but here they pretty much said that that was coming. Again, no ETA, unfortunately. Presumably, the things that they are talking about here will be on the roadmap, and they'll actually tell us when. Along with the hybrid expedition, they did talk about how there will be more expeditions. I think they may have said 2. One of them will be the Varangian Knights. Obviously, these are the kind of things that they do quite well. We'll probably see these at least once every like 3-4 months, something like that. A big one, which was sort of disappointing to hear, but it's nice to know that they're like thinking about it, is that there is not going to be no barbershop. You cannot change your appearance yet. It's not even being worked on by the sound of things, but it's in the to-do list, which is nice that they're going to do it. But yeah, I sort of expected that to be relatively soon. In fact, it's not. One interesting thing about fresh servers is that they're not just going to launch all of the fresh servers at one specific time. They're going to roll them out, and it sounds like we may actually get dates and times beforehand. Now, I don't know if they're going to roll them out over multiple days, or if it's going to be the same day but at multiple times. Either way, the idea being there is that you can sort of say, okay, well, I'm actually in work that day, I'm going to come home at 5, and then I'll start playing on this server that starts at 6. That sounds really good. There's also some really big content creator thing that's happening. Now, as far as I know, this is all happening on Twitch. They haven't contacted me about any YouTube stuff, but that's fine, I'm not complaining. But this Return to Eternum, it sounds quite weird weird. It's basically a lot of content creators all on their own server, inviting their own communities, and they're basically competing against each other. And then at some point you'll be able to go over to that server just as sort of like a casual player or somebody who's been playing on a different server. Look, there was supposedly going to be more details on the website. I haven't seen them. If you're interested in that, just keep checking the website. I'm not going to post about it because I don't know who's interested, but the viewers of those channels will be, if that makes sense. Then they talk about PvP and basically balance, which generally I don't normally get involved in balance, but here I actually think it's quite important. Musket, they basically soft confirmed that there's going to be fall off damage. So basically the further you are away from an enemy, the less damage you're going to do. They appreciate that the musket's actually quite hard to balance because it's terrible in PvE, but really good in PvP because you're playing like 300 meters away. They also said that they actually wanted a counter to the musket to be shields, which sounds interesting. I'm happy for that. They spoke about the rapier and how it's already been nerfed. They didn't like how escapable it is. They don't want that to just be the weapon that everybody's using to get away. And the flamethrower is going to get a minor nerf somehow, going to actually utilize your mana a little bit more. Now, overall, they were speaking about the balance between like melee and ranged in Outpost Rush, and they concluded that they wanted more melee in Outpost Rush, which is sort of like music to my ears in theory because I'm a melee player. However, I personally think that most of the ranged is fine. It's really the range from like 300 meters that is a problem with snipers and stuff like that. And when it comes to snipers, he actually said he loves having snipers in the game, which blew my mind a little bit because I think having snipers like 300 meters away with very little counterplay is terrible. But fair enough. I want musket users to have fun. I just don't think the fun should be at the expense of somebody else. Well, they should be at the expense of somebody else dying, but it shouldn't be the expense of somebody else's fun. But it is what it is. They did say that when it comes to Outpost Rush specifically, that they may actually change the way that it's scored. Presumably, they don't want people to just be scoring a lot of points being 300 meters away. I keep saying 300 meters away. I actually don't really know what the cap is on ranged. I'm presuming it has one, but I've just never tested it. But I'm guessing what they mean with Outpost Rush is that they want people to be closer to the point, so you actually have to engage in some way. They said that there would be no role queuing in PvP anytime soon. Personally, I really want to see that for PvP Arena. Don't think it really makes sense for Outpost Rush. They said that there would be more changes to blocking, basically buffing blocking, okay? More heart runes were effectively strongly hinted at, but not confirmed. The stuff with the war cooldown, even though it was on the PTR, it has now been confirmed that it is going to be coming soon. They just didn't put it in the 1 year anniversary patch. And that is basically if you leave a company, you get a 3-day war cooldown. You'll probably need 35 minimum from one company to participate. And it sounds like war fatigue will be a thing, maybe 1 or 2 per day, something like that. Nice to know that that's actually coming because they put it in and then didn't sort of speak about it again. Practice wars, on the other hand, I'm sort of happy to hear them say this. They're still coming, but it's not a priority for them, which I sort of understand, and I think that makes sense. And then we move on to crafting. Now, crafting is a bit of a sore point for me. I really hate Gamble crafting. I don't think it has any place in gaming, just full stop, and I really don't like it in New World. Now, they did say that they want crafting to basically have more agency, and what I take that to mean is basically they want it to be less random, but probably at the cost of more materials. A little bit like the Golden Scarab, right? That is what they were talking about. And they said that they literally might change some of the systems to accompany that, to actually make that work. Because one of the devs said something that I've been thinking about. If you just gave everybody best in slot items from crafting, nobody else would do any of the other content. It wouldn't really make any sense. It's a very strange balance, and personally I think in the long term it needs a complete gear rework, but it's nice to see that they're planning something. A future addition to trade skills was talked about, but no indication there. I think they're suggesting more professions, maybe something like archaeology or something like that. No details though. They did say that they might want you to be able to sort of specialize in a profession. Now, they didn't put it in that word. They actually said like, we want the crafters and professions to have like more of an identity. So if you're a player, you could be an armorer. Now, they didn't actually say that. I'm sort of like paraphrasing them, but that's sort of what it sounded like to me. Now, an interesting note is that more zones have been confirmed. Very softly, because they were talking about like what they expect in future zones. Brimstone Sands, for example, seems to be an exception when it comes to the size of the zone. They wanted it to feel like a barren wasteland desert kind of thing, but obviously not be devoid of content, and I really think they nailed it. However, they said that they expect future zones to be about the size of Ebonscale, which makes sense. That's perfectly fine. But yeah, no roadmap. I was convinced a roadmap was coming because it sort of sounded like that when Scott said it at the end of the last one. Therefore, I made like a prediction video because we were talking about it on stream. I also expected this to come on like Wednesday or Thursday. No, maybe it's because Fresh Start's coming next week and they wanted to just get people in this like Return to Returnum stuff. But yeah, very confusing timing. I would normally have streamed it, but we had real like no indication that this was happening. However, that's everything that's included in it. I would really like to start seeing timescales because there's a lot of things on this list list, which we sort of know are coming, but we don't really know when. It would be nice to actually put dates on it, and I suspect that's what we're going to get in the roadmap. Let me know your thoughts. Are you happy, sad, angry? Do let me know. Again, big shout out to my YouTube members. If you want to support the channel, best way to do so. What you should definitely do though is have the most beautiful day, like and subscribe. Goodbye.